to Catholic Answers Live, the program where you participate with your questions about apologetics and evangelization, including the most important theological, spiritual, moral, and social issues facing the world today. Call now with your question for today's guest. Toll free 1-888-31-TRUTH. That's 888-318-7884. Now, from San Diego, Catholic Answers Live.
And welcome to another week of great radio here on Catholic Answers Live. This is Tom Price filling in this week from the studios of EWTN Radio here in Alabama. Let me give you our phone numbers. You may want to dial in early because this looks like a wonderful 2 hours straight ahead of powerful Catholic programming. Our phone number is 888-318-7884. To go in reverse order here, in our second hour tonight, we'll have a Chastity Open Forum, and our guest will be Jason Angelette. But in the first hour, also very, very important, contraception versus natural family planning. And our guest expert this hour will be Jason Evert, an apologist and speaker with Catholic Answers. Jason is certainly no stranger to the microphones or appearing coast to coast. He's given presentations to teens at seminars, conferences all over the place. He's appeared on worldwide television, of course, EWTN, Defending the Faith, as a radio guest right here on Catholic Answers Live. Jason has authored several books, wonderful books, including Pure Love, Answering Jehovah's Witnesses. If You Really Loved Me, I have that book, an excellent book. 100 Questions on Dating, Relationships, and Sexual Purity, and also Love, Sex, and Babies. Jason holds a master's degree in theology and undergraduate degrees in theology and counseling. He has a minor in philosophy from Franciscan University of Steubenville. Jason, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on.
You know, this is going to be a very important hour, I think, for a lot of people. And I do want to say right at the outset, because of the sensitive nature of some of what we're going to be discussing, we want to notify anybody, parental discretion as advised. You may also want to, for privacy, if you're intrigued by this, you may want to check out the podcast probably about this same time tomorrow. Just go to Catholic.com if you would rather listen that way. Jason, as I mentioned to you before we began the program today, you never know. You never know who's going to be listening and how new people are to Catholic radio. I know here on EWTN we're now on 128 AM and FM radio stations, so we have new listeners coming in all the time. So we're going to start very basic, if you don't mind. What do we mean by contraception, and what is natural family planning?
Well, natural family planning is, I think, most often confused with the outdated calendar rhythm method, where they counted a certain number of days after or before a woman's period to try to determine when she was fertile. Now, that method was highly ineffective, about a 20 or 30% failure rate, and as a result of that, a lot of even modern gynecologists tend to think, oh, NFP, that's the rhythm method, that doesn't work. Right. Now, what natural family planning is a method of avoiding or achieving pregnancy based upon observing the changes in a woman's body that indicate her fertility. Now, this method of planning out the family is about 99% effective according to the British Medical Journal. There's no side effects, there's no chemicals used, and so it's a totally natural way to plan out one's family if you have a good reason to need to space out the next birth for whatever reason. So that's a little basic of NFP introduction. Contraception, on the other hand, a lot of people think contraception is something also invented recently in the 1960s. While the birth control pill was introduced then, contraception is well over 4,000 years old. We have ancient Egyptian papyrus that would speak about different ways of rendering the marital act infertile. They would fumigate a woman's uterus with smoke. They would cause her to swallow potions of sterility. They would use animal skins, even insert crocodile dung into a woman's body to keep her from bearing life. They would bind the woman's uterus really tight to expel any conceived babies. And even at the time of Christ, we have writings of an ancient Roman gynecologist where he would mix concoctions of nuts and different fruits to create different spermicides. In the Middle Ages, they would use potions. They would make the woman swallow things that included lead, arsenic, mercury, and strychnine. They were very effective contraceptions because the women often died from them, so you couldn't get pregnant. Although they figured that's not the best way to go, so they would try superstitious things. having women wear the amulet that contained the liver of a cat or the earwax of a mule as little superstitious omens to keep you from getting pregnant. In the 1930s, they tried to get more advanced. They encouraged women, and you can find this in women's magazines in the 1930s, encouraging the women to use Lysol or athlete's foot medicine as a form of contraception in their body. In the 1960s, they invented the male pill and the female birth control pill. However, the female pill's the only one that caught on, even though it's proved to be more dangerous for the women. And then all kinds of different birth control over time has popped up. But basically what contraception is an unnatural way to artificially interrupt or sterilize an act of intercourse.
I'm getting a vibe from you, Jason.
What would that be?
I'm getting the vibe that you think one is good and one is not so good. Am I on the right wavelength here?
You have deep intuition.
I try. Okay.
So NFP would be the way to go.
All the way.
Yeah, it's a great blessing, and a lot of people think, I think there's even a mistake amongst Catholics that, well, when you get married, you should use NFP. But we need to take a step back and realize that natural family planning is something that the couple should use, to space out pregnancy if they have a serious reason to do so. When my wife and I got married, we didn't have a serious or good reason to space out kids. We wanted to have a big family right away. Mm-hmm. And so NFP shouldn't be the default. You get married, you use NFP. You should get married and immediately be open to the will of God with being generous towards welcoming life into your family. And the Catholic Church trusts married couples to make that decision prayerfully and generously to decide how many kids they want to have. And so the church will not impose upon families, you must have this many kids. They trust you're going to take this to prayer and make a wise and generous choice.
I think in our day and time, we are hearing more and more negative things about contraception. But I want to get to the biggest one first, right off the bat. Why is contraception considered immoral by the church?
Well, first off, it's not because it's artificial. The church allows you to use all kinds of artificial things, Tylenol, reading glasses. All these things are artificial, but you'll notice what medicine does, the purpose of medicine is to aid the body in its proper functioning. Now, contraception achieves the opposite. You're taking medicine for your body to operate in the way opposite that it's supposed to. Now, fertility is the natural way for the reproductive system to work. And so what contraception does is it's a drug or a device you use to render your active sex artificially infertile. And so that's one thing we need to get out of the way. It's not wrong because it's artificial. It's wrong because it's contraceptive. It takes what God has joined together, babies and bonding or procreation and union, the very purposes of the act of sex, and it separates them. You've also got to look at the fact that many forms of birth control are abortifacient, meaning that they can allow pregnancy to take place and then it will actually terminate the pregnancy that has been conceived. The baby's typically only about a week old when this happens, but this takes place with the birth control pill, the patch, the shot. Different forms of hormonal birth control for the woman do act as an abortifacient. This used to be debated widely, but if you read closely the information that comes with the pill, it does say that it alters the lining of the woman's uterus, so if the baby tries to implant, he's aborted before the baby's about a week old. So you've got the fact it's abortifacient, and to me it contradicts the very wedding vows and promises you make. I promise to give myself to you completely until death do us part. We promise to welcome children into our marriage. And what sex is supposed to be is those wedding vows made flesh. And contraception, at the very moment that you should be renewing the wedding vows, you're contradicting them in your body.
Just doesn't make sense. We're speaking today with Jason Evert about contraception versus NFP, also known as natural family planning. If you'd like to call in, we'd love to hear from you at 888-318-7884. Jason, you may have heard the old saw, which is certainly not true, about annulments, that is sort of a Catholic divorce. Well, there's also some people think of NFP as like a Catholic contraception. Both of those are wrong. Tell us why.
Well, I encourage anyone who comes at you with that, question. Well, isn't it basically the same thing that you're doing? Mm-hmm. I use a couple things to answer that. One is I make an analogy between contraception and NFP being between like a woman who's bulimic and a woman who's dieting. Now, here's how the comparison works. Let's say you have two women who want to maintain a slim figure. One of them practices temperance, and she avoids fatty foods, and she exercises, so she abstains from those things that might make her gain, a little extra weight, and she, sacrifices a little bit. And so that's like NFP. You abstain, you practice temperance, and you avoid the outcome you want to avoid. And then you have a woman who's bulimic, where she binges on the food and then purges out their effects, and that's a lot like contraception, where you binge on the act of sex and then you purge out its life-giving effects. And so it's very difficult to say that, a couple who's abstaining from sex in order to prevent pregnancy is the same thing as people deliberately sterilizing their active intercourse. And if someone's going to press you further and say, no, I really don't see it, I think it's still the same thing, you say, well, at what point does the NFP practicing couple commit a sin? Are they doing something wrong by engaging in intercourse when the woman is infertile? That certainly can't be wrong, because the vast majority of a woman's life she's not fertile. Well, then are they doing something wrong by abstaining from intercourse? Well, no, because abstinence is a normal part of marriage, whether it's travel or the illness of a spouse or the wife is tired from her day with the kids or whatever. Abstinence is a part of marriage. So it becomes very difficult for a person who wants to say contraception is wrong by the same merits to really pinpoint where the couple commits a fault. And you could also put it back on them and say, well, if they're the same thing, well, then why just not use NFP? And the person will say, well, that's so different. Well, if it's so different in the means, it's probably so different in the morality as well.
Wow. Jason Evert here with us today on Catholic Answers, and the award for Best Analogy of the Week goes to Jason Evert for comparing dieting and bulimia. That was excellent. So we're going to retire the award at the beginning of the week. So you scored the whole thing there, Jason.
I don't deserve credit there. Give it to Dr. Janet Smith. So
Well, we're bringing out the big guns today.
Absolutely.
Our phone number is 888-318-7884. The phone calls are already starting to come in, and people want to know about those circumstances where NFP would be a legitimate thing to go. And I guess one thing that pops to my mind immediately would be finances. Is that legitimate or is that not?
It is. And Pope John Paul II, when he talked to married couples about this, encouraged them to take it to prayer. And really, one of the beauties of NFP is it forces you to really examine, what are my motives? What's most important to me? Am I saying financially we're crunched because I can't get a 3-story house or because I can't get that set of jet skis I really want? I think, especially in America, we tend to live in a very materialistic culture. And that's not to say that some couples obviously aren't financially crunched, especially with the economy being what it is, to pay off student loans. And we've got this big mortgage. And man, if we had another kid right now, I don't know how I'd be able to pay for the hospital bills or the medicine or whatever. The church trusts that you're going to make a smart choice in that regard, but really encourages you to reflect that it's a much better thing to deprive your kid of maybe having a sports car when they're 16 than it is to deprive them of the gift of siblings. Because there's no greater gift you could really give to a child than to give him a brother or a sister. And so to really take a step back and pray and say, okay, financially, can we make it? And you really look at, am I being selfish? Am I being generous? And take this thing to prayer. And I think couples who are willing to practice NFP with the sacrifices that entail, they probably have pretty well-formed consciences. And I think they're going to make a smart choice. And you hear, well, can NFP be abused where people use it as a form of contraceptive by not having kids? It could be abused because it is so effective. But I really believe people are willing to take up that cross of chastity within marriage, of practicing NFP, obeying the church's teachings. Their conscience is going to be well-formed. And if they do have questions, they can take it to their priest, their spiritual director, and work through that.
We're speaking today with Jason Evert on contraception versus natural family planning, also known as NFP. In just a moment, we're going to go to our first break. Our phone lines are popping today at 888-318-7884. Before we go to that break, Jason, can you give our listeners perhaps a website or two or some books where they can go after the show is over with?
A couple things they can do. They go to chastity.com, which is our chastity website, where they can read questions and answers on contraception and NFP. But I would also encourage the couples, if they maybe want to explore NFP for their own marriage, or maybe they're engaged and looking into it, call up your diocese. Call up the diocesan offices in whatever diocese you're in, and they should have an office for family or an office for NFP that could direct you to classes, or talk to your parish priest.
Very good. We have a good office right here in Birmingham. All right, as we're going to those phones, we're going to take that first break. Please give us a call if you'd like to participate in today's Catholic Answers Live, 888-318-7884, speaking this hour with Jason Evert on contraception versus NFP on Catholic Answers Live.
Catholic Answers Live. Make it yours.
Each new year brings with it an opportunity for a fresh start. Perhaps your marriage can use a little strengthening in the area of understanding the Church's teachings on human sexuality. If so, listen closely, because Catholic Answers has just the resources you need. Call 888-291-8000 or log on to Catholic.com to order 3 helpful items for one low price. The first is Why NFP, a compact disc featuring our staff apologist, Jason Evert. Jason explains the role of chastity within marriage and why this virtue actually strengthens the love between husband and wife. The next is Good News About Sex and Marriage, the easy-to-understand account of the reasons behind the Church's teachings on sex and marriage. Author Christopher West answers over 100 questions in 9 concise chapters. Finally, you'll get Jason Everett's terrific booklet, Love, Sex, and Babies, a thorough defense of the Church's teachings on the important issue of birth control. Save 20% when you order these vital resources today. Dial 888-291-8000 or visit Catholic.com. That's 888-291-8000 or Catholic.com.
Attention singles, have you heard about the site that puts your Catholic faith and values first? CatholicSingles.com. CatholicSingles.com is a proud sponsor of Catholic Answers Live. You can find out more about us at www.CatholicSingles.com.
The Catholic Answers Minute. I'm Father Vincent Serpa. In Mark 2:18, people asked Jesus why the disciples of John the Baptist and the disciples of the Pharisees fasted, while his did not. There was an obvious effort here to discredit Jesus and his disciples in the face of the Pharisees' fasting, which they took great pride in more ways than one. His response was, "Can the wedding guests fast while the bridegroom is with them? The days will come when the bridegroom will be taken away from them, and then they will fast." The time had to be appropriate. He was concerned that fasting be done as an expression of real repentance, and not simply as a display of righteousness for show, as in the case of the Pharisees. It was truth that he was about. What inappropriate choices do we make under cover of acceptable or even praiseworthy show? It is the truth that we must be about as well. I'm Father Vincent Serpa for Catholic Answers, Catholic.com.
Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
And it's Tom Price here filling in for Jerry Usher from the studios of EWTN in Alabama. Our phone number is 888-318-7884, talking today with Jason Evert about contraception versus natural family planning. And before we go to those phones, Jason, there was something I read on the Internet just this week, or last week actually, about one of the inventors of the pill who now regrets what he has done, and I believe he's like in his 90s.
Yeah, no.
Did you read that?
Yeah, I did get the article. It's interesting. If you simply Google, the birth control pill or some of the forms of contraceptions, and then type in like side effects or even lawsuits, one popular thing coming up now are all the environmental side effects of birth control. Because of all of the women on birth control pills, there's so many hormones of estrogen going into the sewage that you're having fish being deformed, where there are men that are like fish that are transgender because of the hormones that they ingest in the environment. Right. And so it's really interesting to see how the people are so green about keeping the environment pure are going to handle this one. And to me, they just turn the other way and not even want to look at it. But if you just get on Google and type in like birth control pill, hormones, and environment, you'll see what I'm talking about. But I think the side effects are much more severe when it comes to the woman's body. You look at the birth control pill. So often it's been denied that there's any link between the pill and breast cancer, but the Journal of the Mayo Clinic, the Mayo Clinic Proceedings, did a meta-analysis where they studied, and it took about 20 studies of women who took the pill prior to having their first full-term pregnancy, and 18 of the 20 studies did show an increased risk of breast cancer. You've got Depo-Provera, which is the birth control shot. People who make that are called Pfizer Pharmaceuticals, and they're getting sued for $700 million because the shot will thin out a woman's bones to the point where they have women who are 20 years old now who have the bones of a 60-year-old woman. We're talking about college girls needing hip replacements and surgeries because they've been on the shot for too many years as a teenager, and they've got the birth control patch now. It's a sticker the girl puts on, and hormones go through the skin to keep her from getting pregnant. There have been over 4,000 lawsuits against Johnson & Johnson, the people who make that drug, because of all those side effects. Over 23 deaths attributed to the patch so far. Implanon is a new form of birth control. It's a little plastic stick like the size of a matchstick. They'll cut the girl's arm open, slide it under her skin, and it'll sink hormones into her body for a couple years to keep her from getting pregnant. Now, I've read the information that comes with the drug, and it tells the women, call your healthcare providers right away. If you start coughing up blood, you go completely blind or unconscious. Now, it doesn't really explain how to make the phone call if she's unconscious or blind. It's kind of hard to find your cell phone. But
this is whoa! This is in the package that comes with it.
Oh yeah,
the package that you're going to get at the pharmacy.
Oh yeah, legally they have to tell you this stuff.
Unbelievable.
But the women aren't going to read it. It's in microscopic print and medical terminology, and so they're probably not going to pick up on it. But I mean, that's another one of the beauties of natural family planning is what's so wrong with the woman's fertility that it's got to be subdued with all these synthetic sex hormones. The beautiful way that God has created a woman's body is that it already has built within itself seasons of fertility and infertility, and there's no need to artificially thwart fertility at a naturally fertile time. You can just abstain from sex for a couple days, show intimacy in non-sexual ways, and the intimacy of the relationship deepens, and you can plan out kids that way. And when you learn NFP, you can even plan your family because you know when the wife is fertile, and if you want to have a kid, you have the knowledge to know how to do that.
There we go. And let's go to the phones right now. We'll begin with Tom, listening in St. Charles, Missouri on 1460 AM. Hello, Tom. Thanks for calling.
Okay. Now, first thing I want to say, I'm totally in favor of natural family planning. But I read Humana Vitae, and Paul VI in there calls NFP natural contraception. And the only thing he said was wrong was unnatural contraception. So I just want to make that point.
I've read Humana Vitae a couple times, and I don't recall ever seeing the phrase natural contraception, but I think...
I got it right up here on my radio, and I read it, so you might be able to reread it again.
Okay, what paragraph is that in?
I don't know now.
Okay. I'll definitely take a peek at it. I just don't recall him using that terminology. There may be different translations of the original Italian or Latin that the document may have been written in. But basically, I think what the point is there that intrinsically there's nothing wrong with birth control per se. You're trying to control or regulate the number of births that you have. That intention by itself is not wrong. A couple practicing NFP does nothing wrong by saying, I think we have good reasons to prevent pregnancy. The act is okay, and we have that same intention as maybe a couple on taking the birth control pill, but how do we act that out? Natural family planning is the moral way to act out the desire to plan a family, whereas contraception would be an immoral way to act out that desire that may be well-grounded. And so just because you have a good intention does not mean that the act is good, because you have to take a look at how it comes to fulfillment.
Very good. Thank you, Tom. Thanks for checking in with us, listening there in St. Louis, the St. Louis area. Let's go now to Jim in Rochester, New York. Hi, Jim. Thanks for calling Catholic Answers.
Hi. This is a little bit off topic. My wife and I teach fourth grade religious education, and just Saturday, while we were teaching, we didn't know what is the right way to begin teaching somebody at a fourth grade level to properly respect life. Certainly a full description of abortion wouldn't work. So, or point me to some resource we can look at. Thank you.
Yeah, well, a couple of things I would look at is whenever we discuss any respect for life issues, we got to remember the respect for life at the beginning, throughout life, and at the end of life. And so to do things to respect life for the elderly, you could have fourth graders writing letters to people in a nursing home nearby, or coloring pictures and sending to their grandparents, so you can kind of respect the end of earthly life. To respect the beginning of life, I'd recommend bringing in some ultrasound pictures with the 4D ultrasounds you can now get. My wife and I got one of those of our 2-year-old now, Colby, when he was about 4 or 5 months, in my wife's womb. He's about the size of a cell phone, but then when you zoom in on his face, this beautiful image pops up. And so if you could start to show these kids the pictures, there's even videos. I understand there's even footage now of kids who appear to be laughing in their mother's wombs. And so to show these things to a 4th grader, I think would be very appropriate to start to brand into their minds that this is a human being. We're not talking about some blob of tissue like the abortion industry would say. You could also encourage the kids to pray for women who are pregnant and don't know what to do, and so they can include these women in their prayer petitions. There's a book called Angel in the Waters, which is a good little storybook to read to kids. Introduces them to the dignity of human life in the mother's womb. So there's a couple things you could think about doing with them. And you could also even call up your pro-life office for your diocese and ask if they have any tips as well.
Very good. Hey, Jim, thanks for listening there in Rochester on EWTN Radio. And we are speaking today with Jason Evert about contraception and natural family planning. If you have a call, a question or comment, give us a call right now, 888-318-7884. By the way, if you do find this a little bit too delicate to listen to, especially in a family situation, you may want to just download the podcast sometime tomorrow by going to Catholic.com. Let's go now to Heidi, listening on KVSS in Omaha. Hi, Heidi. Thanks for calling.
Hi. My question is just, how would you explain to someone I guess the benefits of using NFP versus the withdrawal method?
Okay. Well, one of the withdrawal method is condemned explicitly in Scripture. You could look at Genesis chapter 38, verse 9. It's the story of a man whose brother dies, and it's part of the law in the Old Testament that the brother needs to take up the widow as his own wife to raise children in his dead brother's name. And so what happens under the story of Onan is Onan takes the wife to himself, but it says, quote, in Genesis, whenever he had relations with her, he wasted his seed on the ground, end quote. And it says that God was greatly offended by this and actually struck him dead. Now, Protestants sometimes say, well, that's because he failed to fulfill this Levirate law to give his brother's widow kids. But Scripture indicates that there's actually a punishment for that. It's in Deuteronomy 25, which is public humiliation, not the death penalty. And so it says very explicitly in Scripture that to engage into the marital act and then to withdraw to keep from bearing life is explicitly condemned. You're also missing the benefits of sex as God designed it to be. We all know from 7th grade biology class that one sperm gets a woman pregnant. What happens to the other hundreds of millions introduced to a woman through a single act of intercourse? Well, they've actually discovered that on the woman's cervix there are lots of lymphocytes, white blood cells, that will actually take entire sperm cells and proteins inside the woman's body to her lymph nodes, where her immune system will actually recognize the genetic type of the man's sperm. So when he fathers a child to this woman, her womb will actually recognize the genetic type of the baby, match it to the genetic type of the sperm that it absorbed into the uterus and taken to the lymph nodes, and it makes for a healthier pregnancy. In fact, they found out women who are deprived of this seminal nourishment are more than twice as likely to suffer from what's called preeclampsia, where she has an elevated blood pressure risk while delivering the child. And now this information is in the Journal of the American Medical Association. There's a number of medical journals that have come out, and you can see them on our website, chastity.com, in the questions and answers on birth control, the fact that the beneficial effects of semen for the woman's body. And so to me, that's one. It aids the woman's uterus. I was sitting on a plane once with the medical journal next to me in my laptop, and I was typing this into a book I wrote. And the woman leaned over next to me, and she said, well, what are you writing about? I said, well, I know we've just met, but I showed her to the journal, and she said, can I read that? And I gave it to her, and she read through it. And she said, I know we just met a few minutes ago, but I feel like I've known you for so long. She said, honestly, my husband and I have used the condom through our whole marriage except for when we wanted kids. And she said, we've had 3 kids. And she said, every single pregnancy I had preeclampsia. How come they never taught this to us in marriage preparation class? And so that's one of the benefits. It actually, some of the medical journals call it seminal priming for protection against preeclampsia, that God has actually designed a man's body and a woman's to work beautifully together. Another benefit of having sex according to God's designs is that the man's seminal fluids are actually absorbed into the woman's body, and they can be found in the woman's bloodstream within hours of engaging in the marital act. This actually elevates the woman's mood. It was in the State University of New York did studies on this, showing that women whose partners use condoms are more likely to feel down. And the scientists said it's not a big surprise because mood-altering hormones from the man are found in the woman's bloodstream within hours of engaging in the marital act. And to me, it's just beautiful, the way God has designed the man and the woman literally to become one flesh. And so there's no need to engage in the marital act and then interrupt it at the very moment that we should be renewing our wedding vows. If we're going to come together as one flesh, it should be as God designed.
There you go, Heidi. Thank you for listening to KVSS, one of our very important stations along the EWTN network. You're listening to Catholic Answers Live, and our phone number is 888-318-7884. As you can imagine, the phones are really going today. Let's go now to Dave, listening on Sirius Satellite Radio in Nebraska. Hi, Dave.
Hello.
Hi there.
Yes. I guess my question is condoms and diaphragms.
Yes.
Are those considered contraception?
They absolutely would be, because under the definition of a contraception, you just break apart the word. Contra meaning against, ception, an abbreviation of conception. So anything that is a deliberate act against conception, anything introduced to the marital act to interrupt it or to sterilize it, would be an act of contraception. So both condoms and diaphragms serve that purpose of engaging in the marital act and then stopping its life-giving effects. So yes, they are both forms of contraception.
Hope that answers your question, Dave. Let's go now to Ann in Indianapolis, listening on FM 89.1. Hi, Ann. Thanks for calling Catholic Answers Live.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
The reason I'm calling, I'm got a little bit of a dilemma. I am 39, married for the first time just for 1 year, and I take a medication that makes it unhealthy for me to conceive a child because it would affect the child's lung development. I tried going off the medication, and that did not work. I talked with my doctor about other possible medications, and there aren't really that have been tested fully enough to say that they are safe for conception. So my husband and I have been practicing NFP to avoid conception. I will add to the mix, my husband does not want to have children. Before our marriage, though, I told him I would not marry if we did not leave that open to God for a period of time. And we met with our priest about that, and the priest said that that was acceptable. So we had talked about just opening it up for a year or so, again, given my age. Now I'm wondering, with having found out that there doesn't seem to be a medication that will work, that, is open to conceiving a child, are we misusing NFP in this instance?
My intuition, hearing what you have to say, would be no, because, you did say clearly it would harm a developing baby. You can also look at, okay, what are the chances it's going to harm? How serious are the harm going to be? Is the doctor exaggerating the harm? Is it increases chances of having lung problems by 4%, or is it something where they're going to have an 80% chance of having severe lung problems? To really take a look at the research that the doctor's giving you and what the likelihood is that the child would be harmed, because you don't want to possibly hurt the child. At the same respect, I would encourage you to find a Pro Nfp Doctor. There's a website called One More Soul, OMSoul, SOUL.com, so OMSOUL.com. You can click on there an NFP-only directory, which will be a nationwide list of physicians who will not prescribe birth control. And you can talk to some of these doctors, and typically they tend to be very devout men and women who have, broken away from prescribing birth control or maybe never gave it to begin with. And it's very good, I find, to find a medical professional who's very open to the Catholic view of family planning and the respect for human life, and would be able to help you make a smart decision in this regard. But with you being 39 years old and, fertility only being possible for so long, something to really pray about with your husband and the side effects that may come from you from going off the medication. It's unfortunate he's not really wanting to have kids, but you might be able to pray that his heart might change on that matter. But I think it'd be wise for you to go to omsoul.com and check out an NFP-only physician and maybe get a second opinion from another doctor. And, because 4 doctors in a row told my wife before we got married that she had to be on birth control for medical reasons. And we went to Dr. Thomas Hilgers out in Omaha, Nebraska, fantastic NFP doctor. And he was able to take care of all of her problems without putting her on the birth control pill. And so perhaps some of the health issues that you're experiencing could be resolved with other medications that your doctor may not be aware of. So you might want to get a couple second opinions.
I really appreciate that link. Thank you very much for that information, and thanks for your time.
You're welcome. God bless.
Thank you, Ann, for calling in. And before we go to our next caller, Jason, my hat is off to those NFP-only doctors, because I know that in many situations, especially if you're not in a big city, that can really impact on the doctor's income.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
It can be really, really tough for them to make that living that a lot of doctors would have no problem making, who wouldn't have that distinction.
It's a true act of faith, putting God first before money. And I think God is really blessing these doctors, because typically I find whenever there's an NFP-only doctor in an area and word starts traveling amongst the homeschooled moms and the daily communicants, oh, you see Dr. So-and-so, so do we, and the word spreads around, and he ends up getting clients and patients that he would not otherwise if it weren't for his act of generosity towards God. So hats off for them.
Absolutely. We're going to take one more call before we go to that second break. Here is Tracy in Omaha, also listening on KVSS. Hello, Tracy.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I actually have a more NFP-specific question. My husband and I conceived 18 months ago, or not 18 months, more than that now, but conceived with NFP and had our daughter. She's 18 months old, and we're kind of starting to get back more on track with NFP because we're trying to conceive. We had just been open to it, but not really doing any charting, and hadn't conceived yet, and so we were trying again. And I was just wondering if there were maybe if there's more information I needed to read, because we're kind of struggling, should I take the class again because it's been a while? I'm still breastfeeding, and so we don't know if that maybe is still playing a part in my fertility, even though I've got my cycle back. And so I was just maybe looking for a direction to head, because I have experience with NFP, but I'm kind of wondering how to really get back on track with it now after having a child.
Yeah, I would encourage you to take another NFP class, because the medicine, the science behind this is always ever advancing and developing, and so I'm sure you can always learn more by going back to a refresher class. Now, obviously, by breastfeeding, that's a natural form of spacing out kids, but if your cycle has already come back, then it's a sign that fertility, from what I understand, has returned as well. And so I would recommend getting back to an NFP class. I don't know if you're using the Creighton model of NFP, but there's a lot of research that backs that up. That's out of Dr. Thomas Hilgers' office out there, or he promotes it out in Omaha, Nebraska as well. And so his website is, I believe, Pope Paul VI, as in Pope Paul VI. I believe it's .com or .org. So the Pope Paul VI Institute for Human Reproduction. You can get in touch with them, and then also talk to your diocese about taking some more NFP classes. So I think it'd be great to go back to a refresher class with your husband and see what else you can talk to the nurses who teach it, and they might have some ideas for you also.
All right.
Okay. All right,
Thank you, Tracy.
You.
Thank you. God bless you. Let's take that second break right now. And if you have a question for Jason Evert about contraception, about natural family planning, this is the hour to call in. 888-318-7884. We're back in just a moment here on Catholic Answers Live.
Just facts, man.
It's all about the truth.
Catholic Answers Live. Each new year brings with it an opportunity for a fresh start. Perhaps your marriage can use a little strengthening in the area of understanding the Church's teaching on human sexuality. If so, listen closely, because Catholic Answers has just the resources you need. Call 888-291-8000 or log on to Catholic.com to order 3 helpful items for one low price. The first is Why NFP, a compact disc featuring our staff apologist Jason Evert. Jason explains the role of chastity within marriage and why this virtue actually strengthens the love between husband and wife. The next is Good News About Sex and Marriage, the easy-to-understand account of the reasons behind the Church's teachings on sex and marriage. Author Christopher West answers over 100 questions in 9 concise chapters. Finally, you'll get Jason Evert's terrific booklet, Love, Sex, and Babies, a thorough defense of the Church's teachings on the important issue of birth control. Save 20% when you order these 3 vital resources today. Dial 888-291-8000 or visit Catholic.com. That's 888-291-8000 or Catholic.com.
There may be no one who's spoken in front of more high school students and young adults over the last few years than Jason Evert. He's become the most in-demand chastity and abstinence speaker in the country, and he'd love to come to your area and encourage the young people in your school or parish to live lives of virtue and purity, even if they've already made mistakes in those areas. Call our seminar coordinator at 619-387-7200 today and arrange to bring Jason Evert to your part of the country. Believe us when we say that thousands of young people have been deeply moved after seeing and hearing him speak. Jason combines real-life facts with his own powerful testimony to pry open the hearts and minds of all those who hear him. There will be tears. There will be laughter. Most of all, there will be changed lives. Schedule Jason Evert to speak in your area by calling 619-387-7200. That's 619-387-7200.
You're not an apologist, right? I mean, you love the faith, and you're trying to know it as best you can. But with the busy life to live, you need a resource you can turn to that's already done the legwork and can give you the answer you're looking for. That would be the Catholic Answers Apologist line. Phone 619-387-7200. Call during regular business hours, Pacific Time, Monday through Friday. Our staff apologists answer thousands of your questions every year. If there's something you need help with, just give them a call. The number is 619-387-7200. Call now with your question. 888-318-7884. This is Catholic Answers Live.
And in this hour, we're discussing contraception and natural family planning with Jason Evert. We'll be taking as many calls as we can during the final 15 minutes of the show. So let's begin with Therese, listening in Santa Fe, New Mexico on Immaculate Heart Radio. Hi there.
Hello there. I have a question regarding the HPV shot. And it, seems so strongly recommended by pediatricians, and I have 2 daughters, 10 and 12, and I'm just wondering, is this going to be something that's going to be required, or what should we do when it comes up?
Yeah, I wouldn't. Well, just to give our listeners a grasp of what we're talking about here, the HPV stands for human papillomavirus. It's a sexually transmitted disease, and recently the Centers for Disease Control approved, or the FDA approved, a vaccination called Gardasil that prevents 4 types of HPV. Now, there's over 100 types of HPV. 40 of them cause genital infections, and they can sometimes lead to things like genital warts or cervical cancer. Now, the HPV vaccine called Gardasil prevents 4 types of the virus, 6, 11, 16, and 18. Now, those 4 types of the virus prevent about 90% of genital warts and about 70% of cervical cancer. So if you can knock out those 4 strains of the virus, then you greatly reduce a woman's chances of having those undesired side effects from it. Now, the problem with the Gardasil vaccine is initially it came out and it was being pushed very aggressively. Over in Texas, the governor said it would need to be mandatory for any women, any girls coming in, I think it was like 6th or 7th grade, would have to get this shot. And then it was later revealed that people from the pharmaceutical companies actually made a campaign contribution to the governor at the same time that he was having a meeting to decide whether or not to have this thing mandated. And he said it was mandatory, and then I believe the Texas House of Representatives overturned that and made it optional. And if you read up on this, you'll notice a lot of people in the FDA and the CDC say it should not be made mandatory because the vaccine is so new. We don't know about the long-term side effects. We don't know even how long the vaccine is going to prove effective. Are girls going to need a booster shot after 5 years from it? And so for me, HPV as a sexually transmitted disease is not something like polio or some type of disease that a person can get from being in close proximity to other people. Provided your daughters are abstinent, they're not going to get HPV. Right. And so if it were my daughter, I would not give her that vaccine. There have been numerous side effects that are starting to pop up: paralysis, facial seizures. There have been 11 deaths attributed to the shot, and the people behind the pharmaceutical industries will say, "Well, those girls didn't die because of the shot. It just happened to be a coincidence." So there's a lot of hot debate on this thing right now. But for me, I see a HPV vaccine being justified, perhaps in the case of a woman who's considering getting married to a man who's been sexually active, and maybe he shows some symptoms of HPV, such as the genital warts, and she wants to protect herself from getting those strains of the virus. But for me, when it comes to making this thing widespread, mandatory for teenage girls and adolescent girls around the country, I don't think it's a smart choice. So if it were my daughter, I'd hold off on this. But this is a decision for the mom, the girl, and the doctor to make. The church has not said that it's immoral to receive this vaccination. The vaccination is not immoral in how it is produced, meaning it's not derived from any cell lines from aborted babies, which some vaccines are. And so the vaccine itself is not immoral. To use it is not immoral. But I'm very hesitant about anyone trying to impose it upon people's daughters.
Well, thank you very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And don't let pediatricians make you feel like you're endangering the life of your child if you don't give them these $360 worth of HPV vaccines. A lot of the physicians, from what I've talked to other mothers, make these moms feel like, how dare you not give your kid this vaccine? Don't you love your daughter? And so I would encourage moms, do some homework on this thing. And think about it, talk to your spouses about it, and you make the call on this one. And on our website, again, chastity.com, under the sections on STDs, we do have an article on Gardasil that talks about some of the side effects and how this was kind of rushed through the approval process at the FDA.
Very good. Thank you so much. And let's go now to Danny, listening in the Dallas-Fort Worth area on Guadalupe Radio. Hello, Danny.
Hello.
Hi.
Let's see, I heard the guest mention some, at the beginning of the program, mentioned some things that were in the New England Journal of Medicine, I think, that were posted on his website.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to find them.
Yeah, okay. Well, it was the Journal of the American Medical Association. How you're going to want to do it is you go to chastity.com, and then you're just going to want to click on Chastity Q&A. And under there, you're going to want to go under birth control, because we were discussing the condom, and then you just click on condom there. And then you read through the article, and you'll notice it's down in the end notes there. End notes was at 24, 25, 26. The study is called an epidemiologic study of contraception and preeclampsia, and it talks about the beneficial effects of man's semen with conception and all of that. And ironically, it just happened to be published on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, December 8th, so I'm sure the Journal of American Medical Association want to be in line with the liturgical calendar on that one.
No doubt.
And you'll also notice some other articles there that back up the same thing from other medical journals. And so what I would recommend to do, take some of these articles, like you'll see there's one, Sperm Exposure and Development of Preeclampsia from the American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology. You want to cut and paste that, put it in quotes, stick it in Google, and you're going to be able to pull up the primary sources of the medical journals on these. Some of them may be free. A lot of them you have to pay $15 or $20 to read the whole article, but you can at least access the abstracts of these articles, which will give a summary. Now, we've made sure on the website there to give several different medical journals that you can look to that point out the same exact thing.
Very good. Thanks for calling in, Danny. Hope that helps you. Let's go now to Jennifer, who's listening online on EWTN.com in Chesapeake, Virginia. Hi, Jennifer.
Hi. I have a question. My husband and I use NFP, and we're currently trying to get pregnant. But he's told me before that sometimes he feels as though maybe I'm kind of just using him for his fertility. So I was wondering, especially with you being a male, if you had some practical advice on how to make sure that we hang on to that unitive aspect of the marital act.
Well, one thing I would recommend is not simply to say, okay, honey, we're fertile. Let's try again. What about the other 20-some days of the month? And to realize that those are days of the month given to you by God to become one, one in heart and one in mind, one in body. And so to take advantage of those days as well, instead of trying to hone in so much, okay, here's our window of opportunity. I could understand perhaps the guy feeling like, well, where are you the rest of the month? And so to take advantage of those other parts of the month and go on dates if you got some kids, have some babysitters come over. We had Gina Rodeo here, in charge of the radio department, come over the other night and babysit our kids. And Crystal and I got to go on a date in a nice restaurant. It's just so nice as a married couple to pursue each other again and go on dates again. I had heard Jeff Caven say that the word in the Bible for a man shall leave his father and mother and cleave to his wife, that apparently the Greek or Hebrew, I'm no scholar there, instead of cleave, a better translation is hotly pursue. But what a beautiful idea that when you get married, then you hotly pursue your spouse. And so, and talk to him, about this. Well, what are ways that I can make it, make you feel more loved the rest of the month, so that it's just not that we're just trying to have a baby. Because most couples fall into the other side, where it's they focus simply on the physical union and they put procreation on the side. And so it can be sometimes where it happens opposite, where the man might feel that we're focusing so much on procreation. So take advantage of the rest of the month, go on a couple hot dates, and talk to him and see what he thinks, because every good relationship has lots of open communication.
There you go, Jennifer. Thanks for calling in. And let's now go to Michelle, listening in Colorado on AM 1570. Hello, Michelle.
Hi. I wanted to ask you if you give me a little bit of information on what I can do. I had a tubal, and I regret what I did because of my side effects. I've been very, very healthy all my life, and when I was 30, I had a tubal, and we have 4 kids, and I have heavy bleeding. I've been taking care of myself, because when I went to the doctors, they said my choices are. They first said, well, these are the side effects that happen when some women have a tubal, and they said I can have a hysterectomy or I can get back on birth control. So I've been taking care of it with natural progesterone, but I'm really want to get a reversal, but I'm worried that my ovaries might have been, I think it's called atrophy or atrophy.
Yeah. Go on.
And so I want to know if you can give me a doctor that I know it's like $10,000, $15,000 to have a reversal and to make sure the blood flow goes back into the fallopian tube. So do you have any information I can have?
Yeah, I would recommend going on the website. We had mentioned this earlier, onemoresoul.com. It's OMSOUL.com, OMSOUL.com. And then you're going to click on NFP Only Directory, and you're going to see a nationwide list of physicians who are very open to the Catholic Church's teaching on human sexuality. And you're out there, I see, in Colorado. So you just want to click on your state, Colorado, see which doctors are in your area. Now, Denver typically tends to be a very solid archdiocese, and so they may have some good doctors out there. If not, Nebraska is not too far off, where Dr. Thomas Hilgers is, and he may perform these operations. And I'm not certain if he does or not, but you might want to write down that name, Hilgers, Hilgers. He has a website for his medical purposes. It's naprotechnology.com, Napro technology.com. And so check out One More Soul, Napro Technology, and if you don't see anyone in your area, call some of the medical professionals that may be outside of your city, and they should be able to point you to a good doctor.
Michelle, thank you. Thank you for calling Catholic Answers. We don't have enough time for any more from you, but we do need to get one more call here from Deborah, listening on 89.1 in Indianapolis. Hi, Deborah.
Hi, how are you?
Sure, great. We just have a few moments.
Sure. Pardon me?
We just have a moment here. What is your question?
Basically, I had my tubes tied. I'm 39, and I have 2 children by 2 different people. And I finally met the man that I actually am going to spend the rest of my life with. We're going to get married and all that and this, that, the other. But I really feel like I was rushed and hurried into having my tubal ligation by, like, my mom, my dad, and, my sister and everybody. They thought, you have 2 kids by 2 different people. What are you going to do with your life? And I just really feel like I never really wanted to have it, because I just wanted nothing more than to be with one of the fathers of my 2 children. Yeah. But I'm not with them, and now I'm with, my fiance, who we're going to get married, and he's 46, doesn't have any kids, and, he's open to having children. So I'm just kind of like thinking, well, what should I do? I don't know how you can answer that question for me. But.
Yeah, no, you're experiencing what so many women do. So many women experience regret after having their tubes tied. And in fact, you probably heard the caller while you were on hold experience the same regret. And she's choosing to have her tubes or tubal ligation reversed, which is something surgically you can do. Now, the church doesn't make it a requirement to do if you've regretted the decision that you've made, but it's something you could do. And so I would recommend, again, the website, omsoul.com. and call up some of the doctors in your area and talk to them about what can be done. And you're in Indianapolis, and there is a good NFP-only doctor not too far from you. I was in Indiana this last week, and there is an NFP doctor not too far from Indianapolis. So you might want to call him up. I don't recall his name off the top of my head, and he could give you some good medical advice. But I congratulate you on being open to life.
Jennifer?
Well, I am. I mean, I'm very strong on abuse of adoption, things like that. But it's like I want to have another baby, and because it's like I said, I wanted to be one of the fathers of my two children, and so now I finally met the man who I actually could, have that family unit with.
Yeah, it still may be possible.
Very good, Deborah. We'll be praying for you, and I want to get that website one more time, Jason.
omsoul.com. And if you can't remember, just go to chastity.com, and it's on one of our links there.
Very good. And I want to thank you, Jason Evert, for a wonderful, fast-moving hour on conception and natural family planning. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. God bless.
And we'll have another Jason coming up in the next hour, Jason Angelette, on our Chastity Open Forum. Keep it right here on Catholic Answers Live. Don't go away.